My name is Napoleon Kittoe. I hope the name rings a bell. For those of you who have been accustomed to television in Ghana, I'm sure you know me. And for the next several minutes or so, I have a special guest to have a conversation with. And I'm sure that the contents will definitely be a bombshell, not only for Ghanaian publics, but for the international community. It's about Russia, the Russian Federation. We all know that Russia, if you cast your minds back and make historical surveys, Russia's name always comes up as a juggernaut until recent contemporary geopolitical discourse and actions or inactions tried as much as possible to diminish its stature in the eyes of the global public. We have the Russian ambassador to Ghana to set the record straight. He is an ambassador extraordinary and plenipotentiary, and therefore he has the full delegated powers of President Vladimir Putin, His Excellency, to deliver a statement on his behalf. Thanks for watching. Ambassador, you are welcome to television in Ghana.
Thank you very much for your kind words and your aspirations to have frank and sincere talk about present-day situation in Ghana and present-day situation in Russia and present-day relations between Ghana and Russian Federation. Of course, it's very difficult to assess it in one or two words because it's very multipolar and very multilateral and multifocal, so to say. And I hope with this interview, with these talks, we could enlighten some thoughts and Ghanaian public on what's going on in Russia, because as I can see here, the Ghana media, Ghanaian media and Western media, they use, to my opinion, the one-sided coin and one-side approach. That Russia is to blame for everything and the rest are just standing still and looking how bad is Russia. That is not true, and I believe that more thoughtful and serious journalists and serious politics understand and evaluate the situation as it stands and how it evolves in history and within time. Yeah, thank you.
That's a good one, Your Excellency. You've been in Ghana for some time, I suppose. How many years now?
A little more than 2 years, because I presented my credentials to President of the Republic, Akufo-Addo, on June 25th of 2021.
I see.
2 years and 2 months, yes.
Which country did you come from? What was your previous posting?
I have a career diplomat, so I served 2 terms. I have 2 missions in Vienna to our permanent representative of a permanent mission to international organizations in Vienna. It was back in the 90s and beginning of millennium. And the last international posting was New York. It was our permanent mission to New York.
I see.
And I returned from New York in 2013, and since that time I served in the foreign ministry, in our central headquarters.
Mm. And since you came to Ghana, anything that has edged on you, our food, our meal, our culture, what at all is it about Ghana that strikes you a bit?
Well, it's quite a frequent question. How do you feel about Ghana? How do you feel about Africa? Well, since it's my first experience both in Africa and in Ghana, I very much appreciate the Ghanaian hospitality, the Ghanaian attitude, the whole atmosphere which I enjoy here. And speaking about the climate is very stable. The situation is very stable. I mean, political situation is very stable, and because when I tell people back in Moscow, back in Russia, my friends and my relatives, that you could just look at the weather forecasts, it's always about 28, 30 degrees the whole year. So it's a very stable situation. Concerning this, some specialities and food, yes, it differs a lot. I do not enjoy spicy foods, but nevertheless, I have already did have a chance to taste jollof rice, fufu, this groundnuts chicken soup. And, yes, I tried it. But jollof rice is too hot for me. Well, normal one, because if you ask somebody to prepare not spicy, it is better.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Time to dive into officialdom.
Okay.
Your Excellency, when Russia's war, so they say, picked up or started in Ukraine, there have been a lot of talk around it, cacophony about it. In Ghana, our government have always been referring to that situation over there as a possible cause of our economic woes. And for the first time, the Russian embassy had to come out to, or I should say, to strike out, to say that no, that assertion is not true, and that that war cannot be rubbed into the internal affairs of Ghana. Why did you do so diplomatically?
It's not only diplomatically, it's based on factology and facts. We can easily look into them. First of all, I would like, again, to use the official term. It's not a war, it's special military operations, because in Western media it's always called a war, but neither Russian Federation nor Ukraine made an official recall of it as a war. They never proclaimed this is the status of war in both countries. And it's special military operations with specific purposes and specific means and specific agenda. Speaking about economic and, first of all, economic situation here in Ghana, well, it's very easy for the world to, or for Western world to say that, well, we have, or you have economic hardships because of this special military operation. But again, if you look at the history and the facts, first we did have COVID-19 situation when the economy ties were were broken for some time, and different countries try to support the population and the economies with financial resources, which were not approved by the real economic situation in those countries. And after that, the main I believe the main purpose of the sanctions were to imposed on the Russian Federation were to make our life as hard as possible. But as I probably said already, every history, every event have two coins, and of course we suffer a lot, but at the same time the economic ties and different economic operators throughout the world and the Western world and suffered a lot too. But that is not because we did something wrong, because we strongly believe, and you could see it in the media or so everywhere, that is sanctions that were imposed by the that is concerns our food products, our oil and gas, and so on and so forth. And speaking about Ghana and Russia relations, just recently we did have a chance to look into the statistical data which were published in 2023 in August this year. It was published by Statistics Service of Ghana, and where Russian Federation occupies less than 1% of export-import operations turnover, trade turnover with Russia. We have, like it is said that, like we have 2% in Europe through European countries, and all over the world we have 0.7%, so less than 1%. So how could Russia affect Ghanaian economy in any way?
And you're saying that it has distorted, the war has distorted international supply systems.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. And that is why because of this. That is not a war, it's sanctions, because as soon as you prohibit to buy cheaper and more reliable, from reliable sources in Russia, oil and gas, the price is going high. We've seen these hikes just after the sanctions were imposed, that European operators refused to buy Russian oil and gas. And as soon as, since Ghana imports the majority of the oil and gas, oil products and mineral oil and oil products from European countries. So the majority of these imports goes from European countries. And as soon as they buy our oil, because despite the sanctions, you do not have infinitive supply of oil in the world market. You have not many countries that could supply oil products or oil, crude oil on the market. As soon as prices goes high, they, of course, these international operators, they sell you the oil products for higher price.
Okay.
That's it. Yeah, the same, more or less the same with foodstuffs, with grain and so on.
The mention of grain brings this to mind. The grain deal, which Russia is said or reportedly pulled out of the grain deal. That is going to also further aggravate the mishap in the international trade system. So if trade analysts are saying that Russia is the cause of their internal woes, wouldn't they be right somehow to some extent?
Well, first of all, let's talk about, let's say a few words about the deal. We have a deal when both parties agreed to that. And you have a deal when both parties to the deal are satisfied with the outcomes of the deal. When you strike a deal with two partners and one partner enjoys all the benefits and the other receives nothing, it's not a deal.
So which is the other that is not receiving nothing?
Because, yes, there were two major parts of this so-called grain deal. One was, the first part was export of Ukrainian grain. It's different, not only wheat, it's other grains as well, like corn or something. And at the same time, there was the export of Russian ammonia for fertilizers. That is one part of the deal. The second part of the deal to ease sanctions on Russian agricultural products. That is payments, insurance, freight, then what else, spare parts, and all logistics that on which the sanctions were imposed. And for more than a year, we fulfilled our obligations. We provided the safe passage of Ukrainian vessels or foreign vessels which were exporting this Ukrainian grain from the territory of Ukraine. And in return, we received nothing because despite numerous actions, numerous efforts of UN General Secretary, Secretariat of the United Nations, other interested parties like Turkey and others, nothing were made to ease our sanctions concerning this payment system, concerning the free discharge of free sale of Russian grain, and so on and so forth. That is one thing. The other thing that we also witnessed that Ukrainian side used these safe care corridors on the Black Sea to deliver military munition to their ports. They also used these safe passages to have some terrorist attacks on the Russian territory, like Crimea Bridge and the Crimea Peninsula. Secondly, well, thirdly already, they also blow up the pipeline, this ammonia pipeline.
The Nord Stream?
No, not Stream. It's ammonia pipeline, which comes from the Russian territory to Odessa, which delivers ammonia, which will be used, which can be used furthermore to produce fertilizers. They blew up on the 5th of June or May, I believe, this year. It was they blew up. That is why, well, we are ready to discuss possible actions. But again, after the Russian Federation decided to withdraw from the so-called grain deal, the only countries that were very much concerned about this is Western European countries. And I also could say that, well, all this grain which was exported from Ukraine, it was already the Western major companies, major Western operators, they belong to them. So they distributed to the European countries. And as you see, out of the 32 or 33 million tons of this grain, most of them were delivered to Europe, to Italy, to Spain, to Netherlands, and so on. And well, they were sold for the, just like with oil. As soon as the prices goes high, they sell it to other countries for the high prices. Or reproduce it, because they also they used to distribute it through Turkey, for instance, because Turkey have a very huge facilities to refurbish it, to produce other products from the grain.
In the musings of Russia, who do you think was behind the blowing up of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, very vital to the scheme of things in that region?
Well, again, it was, I believe, one of the French famous criminal experts. It was Hercule Poirot, I believe, or somebody, or Agatha Christie, the popular personalities from the literature. That if you wish to find a person who is responsible for that, look for the causes, or for the ideas, or for the targets. What. Again, it's absolutely clear that Russian Federation was not intended or was not interested in destroying their own pipelines, because it was our investments. Apart from, well, also the Western European countries like Germany, it was the major investments. And you could recall, again, it's facts and history, that how many efforts we put into finishing this pipeline. Because we have very many sanctions since 2014, and we couldn't finish it in time, and we deliver some special vessels. One company decided not to provide this vessel for finishing this pipeline and so on. But in the end of the road, yes, we finished it. But again, it was the United States president who said that no, we would never allow the new pipeline to be constructed and to be put into operation. And of course, it's purely economic, so to say, background that if you wish to sell something for bigger prices, like liquid gas, you should provide the environment that you could use it. And of course, if you do not have cheaper pipe gas, so you have to buy liquid gas. But at the same time, you have to build up new facilities to have these vessels with liquid gas to be discharged on your territory and so on. Speaking about the who is, well, that is a general idea. We believe that it's joint venture of numerous countries, because the territorial waters of Norway, I believe, and Denmark, and so on. So it's and Germany. But from the very start, all the investigations were limited to these countries, and they say, no, we do not wish to share any information, and they haven't shared information about any outcomes. Further on, there appeared some, so to say, leaks in the media that it should be a small Ukrainian vessel with two divers just to blow up the whole pipeline. It's also, to our understanding, it is a nuisance. And it's a special operation which was put into action with concern or knowledge of the powers or the countries who are responsible for these waters. and we hope we will manage to find out who is responsible for the blow up of this.
Okay.
And we consistently put this question before the Security Council. And we have a number of rounds of discussions already, but unfortunately those people who could provide some light on this issue and on the investigation which is going on, they refuse to share any information on that. And I believe Germany was also the first one who said, well, it doesn't matter, we do not need it anymore, who cares about who is responsible for that, and so on and so forth.
Okay.
But we'll see.
So I will say that from the Russian perspective, Nord Stream 2 is being investigated. It's still work in progress on that front.
We hope that this case is being investigated, and investigators have some more, so to say, confident or solid evidences and more solid outcomes from this investigation, apart from this small Ukrainian vessel with 2 divers. We hope so, but okay. Who will share with this? Would they will to share this information with international community for the benefits of, because it's critical infrastructure, because after that, I believe it was in UK media or in US media, they were thinking, well, in Turkey as well, they were arguing or putting some thoughts that there are a lot of pipelines on the northern shelf, on the Black Sea, transatlantic data cables, and so on and so forth. And it's very important to know who is capable of that, and that this person who is planning to do that should know that it could be investigated, and he could be punished for that. That is very important.
Okay. Your Excellency, Russia calls its operation in Ukraine the Special Military Operation. SMO. At the same time, the West calls it Russia's full-scale war in Ukraine. What exactly is the line will you draw? Are you drawing between the SMO and what the West calls the full-scale war in Ukraine? How do you explain the SMO? Because in the world, people consider whatever is happening in Ukraine now to be a war. You say that it is a special military operation. What are the indicators to differentiate this from a full-scale war as suggested by the West?
Well, first of all, there is, I believe, in the constitution or in legislation of every country has a very specific notion of when the state of war is declared by the government, by the state. And that is why, as I said earlier, we never used this term war. We use it special military because we never declared a war with Ukraine. Special military operations, we have some also historic background that we, just prior to that, we have treaties signed with Donetsk and Lugansk. And in these treaties, there were some causes, some articles about the help in need of help of the Russian Federation obliged to help to defend the civil population of these regions from the aggression coming from Ukraine or from any other country as well. That is the formal part of the thing. The more, so to say, simple indication. Well, it's very easy for Western media to say a war because it's very difficult to explain for your readers, for your listeners, what a special military operation is. War is a war. It's very easy to collect people and collect money and collect armaments and collect anything to provide to Ukraine to sustain the unjustified aggression from Russia. But again, it has some history. You probably, if you acquainted with some facts, that this conflict has a long history. It started, well, officially it started from 2014, when there was a coup in Kiev, sponsored by European and Europe and US. And when the officially elected president was...
Is it Viktor Yanukovych?
Viktor Yanukovych, yes. He was discharged, and after that there was first temporary commission came into force, and the first things they made, they sent, well, the western regions were always anti-Russian. But the majority of the population in Donetsk and southeast regions of Ukraine, then Crimea and other regions also, they have the majority of Russian-speaking population. And they voted for Yanukovych. And with their help, he won the elections at that time. And when people came to them and said, well, we do not want to have any ties with Russia, we will eliminate you. If you would like to speak Russian, go to Russia, and so on and so forth. And after that 8 years of this, well, it's also military. You also could call it, they call it, it's a counter-terrorist operation in these regions in Donetsk and Lugansk. And they started to, step by step, eliminate those people who were in support of speaking a native language and having their own say. After that, Minsk agreement came into force. There were some steps which allowed Donetsk and Lugansk to be preserved in the Russian, in Ukraine, with a special status. And if this Minsk agreement were to be implemented, there will be no necessity to have some military actions on that. But constantly, for both European side and the co-sponsors of this Minsk agreement and Donetsk, Lugansk, because Russia was never the part of this agreement. It was between Ukraine, two regions, with sponsorship of Germany and France.
Okay.
That is four-party, so to say, agreement. But as we witnessed it afterwards, after the special military operation started, they never intended to fulfill this Minsk agreement. They never intended to give these regions the right to express their views, to have some autonomy within the Ukraine. And all this time, as leaders of Germany and France reportedly stated that the only purpose of this agreement were to prepare Ukraine for further fights. Oh. And we, just prior to the special military operation in February 2022, we witnessed that we have information that they were building the forces to strike these regions and to finish this counter-terrorist, as they call it, operation in Donetsk and Lugansk. So that was the chaos. And even afterwards, well, we were always ready for discussions, and we were ready to provide the security guarantees for Ukraine, provided that will not join NATO, and so on. And just after the beginning of the special military operations, there was a couple of rounds of negotiations between Ukraine and Russia, and we even agreed on some texts and some agreement which was actually paraphied by the Ukrainian side. But then it was in March 2022. But then they decided not to further discuss anything with us. They decided, no, our principal task is to have Ukraine in 1991 borders. That means Crimea goes back to Ukraine, and all these regions, and all the Russian forces should be withdrawn from Ukrainian territory, which was not feasible, which was not accomplishable. And since that time, just recently, I believe we heard the U.S. President statement on the UN General Assembly, this weak that is Russia who is hampering, who is not allowing to have the negotiations and peaceful agreement between two parties. But again, we should go back to the facts and see that it was President Zelensky who, by his decree, prohibited himself to have any negotiations with the Russian side.
Okay.
So they first should pronounce or abolish this decree of the President Zelensky, and then further, if they are interested at all.
Okay. Well, viewers, you are watching a special conversation with Russia's ambassador to Ghana. My name is Napoleon Kittoe, the host. Your Excellency, you are a top diplomat, and I know that from your observatory, you are closely monitoring the situation on the ground as far as Russia-Ukraine situation is concerned. Looking at the dynamics on the ground, where the war is driving to or driving at, do you see it being doused, the flames being doused at a point, or you are going to escalate it, given the dynamics on the ground?
Well, it's not concerning the situation on the ground. First, again, we should understand that the amount and the volume of the international aid, military supply of military equipment, armaments, tanks, and so on and so forth from the West is unprecedented. We did never witnessed any conflict where one side is being so much financed, so much influenced from the outside parties, because NATO and Western countries repeatedly said that we are not parties of the conflict. But how you could not be a party when you support military, financially, legally, and so on and so forth, when you support one party? That means you are not a party, but you are supporting one party of the conflict. Speaking about this situation on the ground, well, it's very many speculations, very many acquisitions, and very many facts that are spreading all over the media. But again, we see that the Russian Federation stands on the ground. We do not lose anything on the ground. Unfortunately, the Ukrainian side put too much human resources in the conflict, and the number of people which are being either killed or disabled during the conflict is growing. And they exhausted all their internal resources concerning armament. As you probably know, the Western world provided $170 billion already for the conflict alone. And that causes questions not only within the population of these countries, but also from the government officials. Just recently, the member of Senate, I believe, Mitch McConnell, in the United States said that they will not provide any further help to Ukraine unless they may account of the previous ones, where they use it. Well, and on the ground, well, it's again, it's up to the Ukrainian side to decide whether they would like to stop it. But again, we should, as our president said and our foreign minister said, we should take into account the situation on the ground, because afterwards, it was already after the military operations, special military started. We approved the inclusion of 4 regions of Ukraine into the Russian Federation, and that is the fact. And that is the decision were taken by the appropriate people voting in these regions and so on, and was adopted. And speaking about withdrawing all the Russian forces from these regions, from the Russian territory as we see it now, it will be impossible to start anything.
So in other words, let me put it this way.
Yeah.
What would make Russia decide that this is the end of this chapter? closing the page on Ukraine?
The task is that, as we said it, demilitarization and denazification of Ukraine. Demilitarization means they do not have enough forces to threaten our territory, to make these drone attacks on Moscow and other regions of the Russian Federation, and they should be non-aligned, so to say. No, do not join any aggressive to Russia blocs like NATO, first of all. They should not be a NATO country. And they should not enjoy any military on their territory like NATO bases, because they could have, they could not be a member of NATO country, but at the same time they could have they could decide to have their NATO bases on their territory, which also be a threat to Russia. As we see it, is a threat to Russia, because we firmly believe this NATO expansion, all these recent years developments are present not aggression, but a threat to the Russian Federation. That is one thing. And denazification, that means that all the Nazi propaganda and all the legislative measures which were adopted for canceling Russian culture in the Ukraine, like they prohibited to have any Russian schools. They prohibited people to speak Russian. They prohibited Russian education to be there. They prohibited Russian poets, literature, everything. They just recently, maybe Ghanaian population doesn't know about it, but recently they decided to withdraw any literature from their libraries and to dispose it somewhere. And they prohibit anything. But that is not only for the Russian language concerned, but also Hungarian, also Romanian, and also Polish language. So that is, denazification means that every nation in Ukraine should have their right to speak their own language and to study, to receive education in their own language. So that's it. And another denazification, another approach, another thing is that they should not glorify Nazi heroes, so to say. They believe them heroes, but we believe they're those people who invaded Russia, who make repressions on the Russian population, on the Soviet population at that time during the World War II, and so on. It's ideology of superiority, which goes back to Nazi Germany. It also should be abolished, because as we see, many fighters, so many military men, paramilitary men in Ukraine, they have these tattoos with Nazi symbols and so on and so forth.
Excellency, I thank you very much for that insight that you gave there. I think many people don't know about that cultural encounter or clash that is happening in Ukraine with respect to language and all other facets that, interlock in each other as a culture. Now let's stray a little bit to President Putin with regards to the global picture of Russia in the world and Ukraine. President Putin is the only leader of a supposed superpower like Russia to be slapped with an ICC arrest warrant to be arrested wherever he goes. Before that, Russia had been expelled from the G8, now it is G7. And Russia has also been facing economic sanctions, and the public relations stunt about Russia has not been too good. Do you think it is an orchestration to belittle Russia in the eyes of the world when others know Russia to be a juggernaut? You think all these schemes or all these measures are meant to make Russia look small than it is to the world?
Well, speaking about the attitudes or perception of Russia in the world, what you just said, And what you explained, it's the view of the Western world, how they see Russia. Because we never stopped our relations with other countries which have more wider concerns or more, so to say, they favor not rule-based order like Western countries, but a more multipolar world. Concerning the ICC warrant, yes, it's just another organization with its own agenda, with its own views. But at the same time, we are not members to the Roman Statute, and we do not see that it's valid to have any international warrants concerning our president and our special representative for children's rights, there were two warrants actually. This organization, this International Criminal Court, has quite a history of making decisions and biased decisions, so to say, because they tried at some point, they tried to investigate war crimes of US and Great Britain in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and in Libya. And after some time, though prosecutors were ex-prosecutors, became ex-prosecutors, and again, US also do not recognize the responsibility of the International Criminal Court, as they do not see it as a legal instrument to put their citizens into judgment. And moreover, we also know that United States have special protocols with all members of the Roman Statute of all the countries who supported or who have joined this Roman Statute and acknowledge the ICC rulings. That it's in the Roman Statute that some countries could decide that a third party should not be obliged to any proceedings of this criminal court. And US has disagreements with almost every member of this ICC court. That is one thing. Concerning G7, G8, well, it's I believe it was mutual understanding, or so to say, mutual deal that since we do not share the same views on different international agenda items, we could not be in the same. And if you do not like to hear our views and to take our views into any account, so what should we say? What should we do? We should not sit together. And afterwards, I believe it was 2006 or some time later, the BRICS appeared, and now it's enjoyed the very wide support. And again, it's the division as it stands now, that Russia is a small country with almost no resources. Just look onto the map. It's not that small as you can see, and that is one thing. And another thing that, well, we wish to maintain our relations, and we wish to talk with partners. They share same values, same views. Not same views. We could differ on different. We could have different views on the various topics. But at the same time, we are ready to hear each other, to listen to each other, and to make a joint decision. If nobody agrees, or if anybody agrees, that means we do not have an agreement.
Okay.
And nowadays, we see that the United Nations and other international forums, they are being, so to say, they have to follow the rules, and the rules is a majority. But majority is not always a democracy. Because in some instances, you could persuade people, you had, as we see it now, that some countries do not wish to spoil their relations, first of all, financial relations with some bigger countries. Some decide, well, say some people, some countries abstain, saying that, well, it's not up to us to decide. It's, well, those powers decide between themselves, and we'll just listen and what will be the outcome. So that means, well, we promote now, and we see that quite a number of countries wish to have the equal dialogue, like in BRICS, like in Shanghai International, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and others. And just recently, as you probably, unfortunately, it was not widely spread in Western media, and as a result in the Ghanaian media, because you use most of the, in your media, most of the informational resources from the West.
Yeah.
It was not very much acclaimed or very much shown in the media that the recent BRICS summit in South Africa, where we have 5 countries and 6 more were invited to join BRICS, and there is a number of others. And again, it's not an economic organization, it's not a political organization, it's not any formal organization that have its own secretariat, some statute or something like that. That is a club of countries who come to each other and try to find out decisions for very difficult situations which the world faces, and the countries faces, and people of the country faces, both in economic and the security issues and so on and so forth.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which means that BRICS now offer another outlet for Russia and its friends to find a way, a means of tackling problems outside the forum where they are likely to face opposition, especially when you come into face-to-face with the West, which normally you are diametrically opposed on many issues when it comes to the issues on the table. But that will send me to another natural follow-up question that has to do with, you know, the resource wealth of Russia. You have uranium, you have gold, you have oil and gas, and so many agricultural fields. Because you talked about grains, you talked about cereal fields, etc. So Russia has a lot of natural endowment. And yet when Russia is mentioned, the belief is that Russia, all what Russia or there is to Russia's name is military hardware and things about the military. Your Excellency, Russia has also been positioned as a country that is always struggling despite all what you have to your name. These perceptions that are being projected into the eyes about Russia, do you think it's a make-believe, or the reality is what they are painting about Russia?
Well, yes, probably people, well, we have all these resources, you rightfully said that. Maybe first thing that come into mind to the people that our military equipment and so on, because it's the best, maybe. You could spend billions of dollars to build some other equipment which is inferior to Russians, and we are trying to build our on the most cost balanced way. Speaking about Russia, well, let's remember who came first into space. Let's remember about our atomic energy. We have Russia have atomic icebreakers on the ground. They are not being sold because nobody wants them, because they do not explore northern waters and northern pole as we are, because we are just establishing us of this northern seaway along our borders. And speaking about other, well, it's again, it's a part of, I will not say propaganda, it's a part of the wish of various media resources to enlighten the way of life in present-day Russia. because as soon as some reporters come to Moscow, to Russia, they try to focus on the topics that they see will be interested to their public. And but if you wish to have more present-day picture, if you would like to see the real situation, what's going on in Russia, you should try to, well, of course, somebody could say that it is Russian propaganda when you see Russian media, like Sputnik, Russia Today. But it's the same, it goes vice versa. CNN and Reuters also propaganda from the Western side, diminishing our role and exaggerating their role, and so on and so forth. Every country and every media has an agenda. Unfortunately, it's very difficult to say about independent media, because every resource gets the funding, the resources from somebody. And speaking about more true information about Russia, well, I invite first everybody to try to find Russian media in the internet and other platforms, and then, if you wish, please come to Russia and see yourself what do we have, because there are some different resources, some evaluations, some ratings that are being put, and for instance, Moscow now is one of the first, occupies the first place on digitalization of the present-day life of the citizens of Moscow. We have new, for instance, we have underground, we have metro, yes, and during the recent, I believe, 20 years, it doubled. We have more than 250 stations now, only in Moscow.
I see.
Underground, that is a very huge thing.
Yes,
I hope Accra at some time have the underground, so you could travel without any traffic jam. At least one line along Independent Road, Liberation Road.
Wonderful. Yeah, that is it.
It should be.
We should move into that greater partnership.
Of course, it's difficult, but at least to think about ground transport of some kind that goes alongside the regular roads, and have some like this railway between Accra and Tema. It's very popular, I believe, now. We have a lot of manufacturing plants, and it was again thanks, I believe, not due, but thanks to the sanctions when we reverted our resources for internal production, for internal development. Because for the recent years, it was like 10 years or something, we achieved a level of self-sufficiency in foodstuffs and products and in foodstuffs. We fill all our needs by ourselves. We do not. Well, of course, we enjoy some tropical fruits, because they are not grown in northern parts of the country. But at the same time, on the basic foods like meat, poultry, grain, vegetables, and so on, we are self-sufficient. Then a lot of companies which decided to went out or withdraw their assets from Russia left the facilities, and nowadays, for instance, IKEA facilities are being used by Russian firms, and they develop this and so on and so forth. And we also have some historical production of various machinery for transport machinery, for everything. It is not well known outside Russia, because we have such a huge country that we could use it within our territory. Of course, we do need some export earnings, but nevertheless, we also have a very huge dealings. We have a very huge market inside Russia, so we could supply it with our own production.
So, Your Excellency, I think what I can deduce from what you are saying is that all the air that is wafting around your country, Russia, is just propaganda, and that the significant Russia is still in place, a potential tip-top country That is what you mean.
Yes, that's what I mean. Because, well, I do not appeal to our viewers that they trust me by my words. And what I appeal, what I say, what I'm saying, well, let's try to see both sides of the coin. And let's try to find information, try as much as possible to use a balanced approach to anything happening. That concerns every country. It concerns Ghana, it concerns Russia, it concerns Ukraine, everything. Because you have to look into more wider picture, not just listen to either media, Russian, Ghanaian, or Western saying you. That you should try to evaluate, you should try to think about it. Okay. And there are some very simple questions when somebody will try to sell you some information. You could ask yourself, well, is it true or not? Yes. Is it possible or not? Is it true? Well, where could I check it, double check it? Where is it possible to find out any other information concerning this issue? And especially when it concerns your present life. Mm-hmm.
Yes, we are gradually winding up on this interesting, fascinating, and enlightening conversation with Russia's ambassador to Ghana. But before that, let me quickly zoom us into another sphere of our talk. You know, Russia has been engaging Africa deeply of late. You know that? You know that. And one of them has to do with the Russian African summits. We also had the private military company that is the creation of the Russian government, Wagner, also operating selectively in some countries on the African continent. Then, recently, Russia also decided to write off Africa's debt to the tune of $20 billion. And recently, I read somewhere that Russia is considering a visa-free travel between Africa and the Russian Federation. Granted, these are true, and I think I dare say that they are true because they have been happening. Will you say that Russia decided to write off that debt of Africa to spite the West, because there are a lot of conditions that accompany accessing IMF and World Bank loans that are controlled by the Western powers? Now Russia comes out and drops this bombshell. We are writing off your debt. You've also paralleled US-Africa summits, China-Africa summits, and UK-Africa summits. You have also come up, stepped forward to set up the Russian-Africa summit. Russia wagging its tail to prove that it's a juggernaut, isn't it?
Well, the decision to hold the first Russian-African summit was long ago. It was long before the special military operations. It was before COVID. The first Russian-African summit took place in 2019 in Sochi. That was not because we have sanctions, not because we have no other partners apart from Africa and Asia to develop our relations with Africa. That was the, so to say, rethinking our policy, our global policy, not only concerning Africa, but concerning other regions of the world. Speaking about Africa, yes, it was, in Soviet time, we have a very close relations with Africa, with various countries. And you probably know better than me the role of the Soviet Union in Ghanaian independence.
Yes.
And just recently, that tomorrow we celebrate the Kwame Nkrumah Day, Memorial Day, and we also prepared some photographs picturing or explaining the relations that existed at that time. Nowadays, we see that Africa is being developed, and it's developing, it's consolidating, it's becoming one of the major powers of the world. And not as a continent, but as people, the population of Africa is growing and the influence growing. The intention to play more thoughtful role in the world development. The countries assessing the influence of the Western world in the development, like climate agenda, green agenda, and so on and so forth, imposed on some countries, and so on and so forth. Speaking about writing off the debts, it's it's our decision. It's a political decision. We do. It's not being done spite the Western world. Which never, they have some history of writing off the debts. It's not only Russia, Federation which do that. There are some other countries also, for the least developed countries, they also write off debts. There is in some practice. It happened that our decision coincided with Russian-African summit, but it was a decision. At the same time, we also would like to provide some assistance to African countries, and that was also announced on this Russian-African summit that we would like to deliver free of charge grain and fertilizers to some countries in Africa. It's reassessing, and we are thinking about it. We are consolidating our thoughts of our cooperation with Russia. We are looking forward to cooperate as much, to enhance and to expand our cooperation as much as possible. Because we see the potential and we see the willingness from African countries to develop. We do not see we do not say in any forum that you should develop your cooperation only with Russia and forget about everybody else. No, we are saying that every country should have the right to decide which country she would like to extend cooperation and make bilateral contacts and so on and so forth. That is the sovereign right of every country, and as soon as any country decide to develop cooperation with Russia, we are ready to do that, if it's in our interest as well. Speaking about Wagner, it's a decision of those countries who decided to ask Russian paramilitary to help them to maintain peace and to fight terrorist attacks and so on. Because we also could check in the media that not only Russia has paramilitary. There is US, the United Kingdom, France, and other countries. They also have paramilitary. They were operated back in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and other countries, and they also have some experience and some history behind this. And here now, we should stress that it's never been any threat to the population of the countries of they were operating there. And again, now you probably follow this history about Wagner, and now it's been also in a process of reorganization, so to say. But those obligations that we have before African governments, we will fulfill, and we will discuss how further improve the situation, first of all, security situation in those countries.
But let me stroll straight away to, our final question, if I should put it this way. That is the last but not the least question, and it has to do with the fact that if we put everything together, everything about Russia today to get together, with Russia, Ukraine as the focal point of everything, how do you assess your internal public responses? I mean, your public, Russian public. How do they assess or feel about Russia's place in the global setting today? Do you send feelers to find out what actually how their thoughts and to assess how their moods are when it comes to how Russia is playing it out on the wide field out there?
I see. No, we are not fearful. We are as proud as ever. And of course, I will not hide it from you that we have different views within Russia concerning every situation, concerning special military operations. But the overwhelming majority, and I should stress it, and this support of the decisions of the president and decisions of the government and the decision of the presidential administration to have this special military, to start these military operations. So the majority of the people, the overwhelming majority of the people, support the actions and support the. And moreover, because I believe we in Russia have a more balanced picture of what's going on in the West, and we have the chance to listen different views, different views, different experts, so to say, politicians and so on. And we invite some politicians from the West to our media. Okay. And people see that how the situation evolving, and we see that now all of the masks are off. And we see that it was deliberately for a couple of years, for decades, Western countries were not ready to see Russia as an equal partner.
Okay.
That is the main, because maybe you've seen it in the media that all over Europe they decided to cancel theaters, to cancel different artists. Before that, there was a deliberate situation when our sportsmen were on doping scandals, were deprived from the ability to compete in Olympic Games and various international competitions. And again, it was just on the click of the two fingers that, well, Russia is expelled from everywhere. And we see that nobody wants to hear us, to see us. We are not superpower. We are independent country. We are one of the major players of the world, and we would like to be seen as it is. We do not wish to have some superiority or some special rules, some special attitude, but to be as much equal as possible. It's in our culture, in our spirit, and in our thoughts. And again, speaking about BRICS, we see this forum as one of the possible solutions, and one of the possible forums where people could exchange their views without being dictated by anybody.
Okay.
That is the point.
So, Your Excellency, not to put words in your mouth, probably what you mean here is that Russia is not like a meteorite that is falling on other countries.
No.
Like a superpower may be deemed to be doing. But then, since I described my previous question as the last but not the least, I think I can grant myself that little opportunity of asking the last question before we take off from here. And that has to do with the fact, the perception, the growing perception, which has also engendered that fierce contest from the West against Russia, that His Excellency President Putin has come up with a raft of measures placing Russia in a situation that appears to roll the world back to the Cold War days. Your Excellency, is this tenable?
Well, it's a two-way street, I believe, because in our view, and again, we should see to the facts and the history of different issues. And speaking about Cold War era, in the end, or during this Cold War era, and in the end of this, coming to the end of this, we have a number of bilateral agreements with the United States as a major nuclear powers. We have a complex of different strategic stability instruments. But at some point, after dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991, the United States decided that they could go along and they could do whatever they want. They withdrew from anti-ballistic treaty agreement. They seized other opportunities. So they never ratified a comprehensive nuclear test ban treaty agreement and so on. Comprehensive nuclear test ban treaty. That means they start expanding NATO to our borders. They placed, it was even before the 1991, they placed their nuclear weapons in the European territory, in Turkey, and so on. And we see it as this close connection of strategic weapons coming to our borders. It's a threat. We consider it a threat. Look back to the Cuban crisis. It was the same, but we decided, and people decided to have some more wise approach and to tackle this problem. Nowadays, the United States and NATO countries decided, no, we should not take into account any thoughts, any problems that Russia have with the national security, stability, national security. We do what we want. And in response, of course, it causes quite natural concerns to the government of Russia and to the president. And we repeatedly said that we will never do at first, but as soon as we have any threat, we strike back.
Okay.
That was the point, and please do not try it. Please do not think of in this direction, because that was Western media who put into general discussions of the threat of who will use a tactical nuclear weapon, who will strike a nuclear weapon at all, and so on and so forth. Okay. That is their agenda. That is their way of thinking that that could be possible. And as it was, I believe, our foreign minister spokesman, Maria Zakharova, who said that if the West have any chance to destroy Russia without any consequences, they will not think even a minute.
I see.
That's it. That is our understanding, and that is what people of the Russian Federation really think.
Thanks very much, Ambassador Berdnikov, Russia's ambassador to Ghana, speaking to the world from the pivotal location of Ghana that has been a country known for its Pan-Africanism and its growing stature in world politics since the days of Kwame Nkrumah. But in this discourse with Ambassador, he has made it clear that Russia is a peaceful country, and therefore Russia only acts when actions or inactions by others have sought to provoke Russia. And all Russia's reactions have been to protect its sovereignty, territorial integrity, and its interests. He says that Russia is still a significant country and is ready to partner with the rest of the world. My name is Napoleon Kittoe. Thanks for watching.